You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. Just a heads up, this episode is brought to you by my book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, which has been listed as one of the best screenwriting books of all time by the Book Authority. If you're looking for something that reveals the secrets of screenwriting in an easy to understand and engaging way, then this is the book for you. You can find The Guide for Every Screenwriter at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com/books. Now, on to the show. Welcome to the podcast. I've got on a really cool guest today, author of Yes, Introverts Can, Jacqueline Shaulis. Jacqueline, thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So guilty as charged. I was an introvert for a long time, had to find my inner extrovert, I guess you could say. And I was the guy, this is a screenwriting podcast. I have filmmakers that listen. I was the guy that would go to the film festival and sit on the couch and not talk to anybody. Before we launch into this, though, I want to hear a little bit about you and your origin story.
Sure. Well, I'm Jacqueline Shaulis, the Excitable Introvert, and I work with introverted women to get seen, heard, and respected by embracing their awesome. And so for me, introversion is something that it's part and parcel of who I am, although embracing that, like from a branding standpoint, is fairly new, and it was terrifying because people have this notion that if you are introverted, then you're shy, you're quiet, you're antisocial, you're all of these things. And I'm not any of those things. And so should I really call myself an introvert? Am I really? And the truth is that introversion has nothing to do with being shy or being bashful. You can be a shy extrovert. You can be a socially awkward extrovert. The whole difference between this is that introversion and extroversion, it's just a spectrum of how we internally process. Introverts need to process their world internally. And so we are taking in all of the stimulation of what's happening around us. That this conversation here where I'm just saying, we take in all the stimulation. The introvert, because they're internally processing and they're taking everything in, they hear that. It's like, okay, well, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
What's in around the room? Are there any other people? We're thinking about all of these different things, deciding whether we need to respond. How should we respond? We're balancing like 12 plates at once with every interaction. And so, of course, we need to step away from stimulation to sort out what's even important about all of this that we've taken in. Well, people who are on the extroverted side of things, they need to outwardly or externally process. And so many times we think of extroverts as being like the life of the party. They're the one who's always so charismatic, but that is not what makes them extroverted. They have to talk and engage and move around and navigate their world to even begin to figure out what they think about a conversation.
Yeah.
So when I say introverts need to process internally, an extrovert is ready to jump in and say, well, I don't know about that. Let me talk about it. They're like wanting to like have this whole dialogue so that they can sift through and even know what they think about it. And so just having that understanding of it's not quietness per se, it's how we process. That's what makes the difference. So now what do we do with that? Like what do we do with that information?
Well, I think it's interesting. Because I do know those people that they process verbally. And so I'm sitting here trying to figure it out, and I'm going through multiple scenarios and doing my critical analysis in my head while this other person is chatting on, and I'm just like, what are they doing? But no, it makes a lot more sense now. That's how they're processing. It's part of their character. It's who they are. It's not just that they're trying to suck the energy out of the room or anything. They're trying to come to it how they normally do. I found, for me, being that socially awkward guy, the socially awkward quiet guy. That was really hard for me to find my footing in this industry and really network and make connections, because in screenwriting, in the filmmaking business, it is about connections. It is how you can meet and network with other people and show them what you're able to do and how you can help their project. So I had to almost discover an inner personality that I didn't know was there. I don't want to say like playing a character, but I would almost kind of step into the shoes and like turn it on when I needed to. Is that something that kind of resonates with that type of an introvert?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Beyonce is an introvert, and what you described is what she does to use her introversion. And I refer to it as having an empowered alter ego. So you are delegating out those peopling tasks. It's not that we don't like people. We just don't want to shoot the breeze. Like we don't have time for that. It takes too much effort to sort through things. And so we delegate that outward facing task to this alter ego. So that person, that persona, if you will, is the one who is doing all of the schmoozing and listening to the extroverts like think, having to deal with all that's going on. And then once that's done, then the reins get turned back over to the introvert. Beyonce mentions that she calls her empowered alter ego Sasha Fierce. And so when she's on stage, Sasha Fierce is the one who's on there, not Beyonce. When she needs to go home and be with her family, Sasha is not there. Beyonce is there. And so that is the way that she uses her introversion to create those healthy boundaries. It's very easy for us to blur the lines, because extroverts, they blur the lines all the time. We have to have boundaries because we are taking so much in. And so what you described, I mean, you're using that assign and serve technique that I talk about in my book.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I just kind of, when I had to go do interviews and things like this, I'll give you an example. I had to go do my very first red carpet interview when I was over in LA, and I was at a film premiere, and I won an award, and I was honored, and I had to go do red carpet premiere, and I was going to interview, by the reporters and stuff. I freaked out so bad. I got a huge bloody nose because my blood pressure was so high. It was like super embarrassing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I went and I cleaned up, and it's awful, terrible, but it is a really funny situation. So then I realized, okay, I need to figure this out. I can't be busting a bloody nose every time I get on camera. So I was like, okay, how do I do this? And so then I just started kind of looking at, okay, people that I really admire and how they interact and how they have this welcoming personality. I tried to find aspects of me that I could kind of shine a light on. Do you have techniques for that you're teaching?
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the most crucial things, besides introverts recognizing that there's nothing like wrong about your introversion, like that's actually your gift. Aside from that, or even not aside from it, once you've gotten that part done, once you take that out,
there's no shame in it. I'm not ashamed of it. I just needed to. I know I needed to be more out.
Yeah. But that's something that it's so easy for us introverts to feel bad about our introversion, because the conversation is never, why don't the extroverts sit down and hush? The conversation is always, why don't the introverts get out of their shell and talk and do and all of this? And so it's always from the lens of introverts needing to change to be more extroverted, never the other way around. And so that it's very easy to take on, okay, there's something inherently wrong because everything and everyone is pointing out how deficient I am as someone who does need time to process. So it's important for us to recognize the truth of the matter is that our introversion brings so many wonderful gifts, and our ability to serve is the main gift that we can bring. It's because of that quietness, that steadiness, where we're able to observe everything that's happening. Two of the most beautiful things that we can do, and especially as screenwriters, this is so important. We are able to, one, observe so many nuances of our environment. We are able to see such complexity, and not only in individuals, but how the dynamics of people go. And it's it comes to us intuitively, and we don't recognize that there, as introverts, it comes intuitive, but it's so needed in the way that you write these more compelling and complex characters and creating scenarios that feel very relatable and realistic. Tap into that introversion for that, because you do it naturally. And the other piece of that is how we are able to also not just look at kind of the nuanced nature of humanity, but seeing so many different scenarios. Oh my gosh, the introvert brain creates so many unnecessary like scenarios. Like we could take something simple, like I'm going to go and get a loaf of bread, and before we haven't done anything but had the thought, I'm going to get a loaf of bread. We then create all of the, okay, should I get bread or shouldn't I? Maybe I need to wait until tomorrow. Well, wait, if it's raining tomorrow, and then there's that person, well, do I want to get bread tonight? I could probably have something. Like we have created this whole world. And before we've even had enough time to honestly, if we were speaking, I need to get bread, the universes that our brains have created with all of these different scenarios and backup plans and contingencies and just all of this
I plan
for the simplest things. But as screenwriters, it is such a wonderful thing if you are intentional about it, because now you're able to bring in these different aspects that others wouldn't have been able to, because your brain has already created like 15 different ways this can go wrong, and maybe like 2 or 3 that it could go right.
That's
and
hilarious.
How all of the different characters will react and what will happen in the environment because of these different scenarios. So how do you take that ability and then intentionally point that to your zone of genius, in this case, screenwriting? How do you take that complexity and now add those shades of nuance? How do you add those layers of realness to what you are creating? Even if you are not creating something to be a realistic, you can bring in that depth and
the details,
really that complexity.
No, I think you're right. When I meet someone and I get to know them or form even a casual relationship, if it's the barista at the Starbucks, I take them in, right? Like I absorb who they are, and I really enjoy that. And then I'll strike up conversations, and I'll try and see how they're going to answer things. And it's not on purpose, but I am picking up traits that I will end up inevitably using. I was hanging out with somebody one day and they actually caught me doing it, and they're like, "You're nefarious." And I'm like, "No, it's just what I do. I'm not trying to like steal this person's soul. I just like, they're fascinating to me, so I'm absorbing who they are, you know?"
And that's part of how we work. That's part of how we operate. So it's great when you are in an industry where you have that creativity and you have that leeway to do that. When you're in accounting, it's a little bit more of a struggle, because your brain is still creating all of these worlds. You're still creating these scenarios. You're still picking up all of these nuances. But then what do you do with that? Because you're just looking at spreadsheets all day.
Right.
There are still ways for you to do it. But because you're in a space of creation, you have much more leeway with how you're able to channel those gifts of introversion.
So I have an outlet. Now, do you recommend an outlet for introverts who are not writers, who are not in a field that allows them to express themselves?
Absolutely. I often tell people, and this is something else that I mentioned, is that you need to either find or create yourself a lane. Where is that place that you can use your natural skills and abilities and talents? Sometimes that has nothing to do at all with the work that you do, but by finding that place to have that fulfillment of putting yourself into service by using those skills, it's inherently satisfactory to us introverts. The satisfaction that we get from being useful is we can think and do, but we have to. It's a weird quandary that I don't think a lot of people get.
I think it's fulfilling.
Don't want to engage with people, but we want to be able to do things for and with people. You know, it's a weird thing. We don't want to spend all of our time like talking about the weather. We don't want to just hang out for all that. But if I can do something really useful, if I can find a way to be of service, if I can find some way to put what I have to offer out there so that someone else is getting some benefit and I'm getting the joy from it, I'm there all day.
That's awesome.
I'm the life of the party in that scenario until I'm drained, in which case I disappear. So
hilarious.
finding that lane or creating that lane is super important for us introverts, for not only being able to have that outlet, as you mentioned, but also for us to show up even more in our workspace and those areas that are our zones of genius.
So, I mean, an act of service really is what that it sounds like. It's kind of funny to say. I try and mentor other writers, other screenwriters, and they'll thank me and I'll appreciate it, but it gets awkward. It gets awkward. Like, like I'll get a letter like, wow, you really changed the way that I view screenwriting. And I'm like, that hits me and I appreciate it, but then I don't know how to respond to it. So,
oh my God, you saw me.
Yeah. Stop it.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, I get it. So now I want to get your opinion on this, because this is a term I'm seeing thrown around a lot more than it used to be, the social battery.
Yeah, I understand what's meant by that. It's basically the amount of energy that we either gain or that we expend in being in social scenarios.
Right.
And there's a lot of accuracy to that, but it is not the complete story. Typically the way that we hear people talk about it is, if we're introverts, if you're in social situations, then your social battery gets drained. If you're around a lot of people, if you have to do a lot of engagement, but we don't have to physically be in someone's proximity to be drained by this, aka Zoom. How many times
what are you trying to say right now?
How many times have we introverts just wanted to turn off our cameras? I mean, it's just us and the screen. But even having on the camera, it's draining.
Yeah.
Because of
you have
the
to
way
be
that
on.
your brain is processing.
Mm-hmm.
You're still having to sort through all of the same things that you did before, but now you don't have the advantage of having that conversation and that back and forth. So now you're trying to make sense of all that's happening while you're watching someone's cat walk by. You're wondering if you've got something in your nose. Oh, you forgot to do the dishes. Can someone see what's behind? Like, we've got all of this.
I mean, I've had toilets flushed during live tapings.
Yeah. And now you're like just losing your mind over that. And most of the time they'll hear it.
Most people don't care, but we're like, what you've ruined the moment.
For us, months later, we're still ruminating over that one time.
Yeah, you're 100%
so
right.
It's a bit not deceptive, but it's a bit misleading the way that this idea and this notion of the social battery gets discussed. Because it's often discussed in terms of us interacting face to face. Now, there's another side to that that's also missing, and that's how introverts are recharged with other people. It is not engaging with other people that depletes us, and so now we need to sulk in the corner in solitude. Some of us do need to sulk in the corner with solitude, but there are people in our lives that actually do reinvigorate us, give us energy. And those people, having that contact and those social elements with them, actually benefits us. But that's not often looked at or discussed, because the notion is you don't like people.
No, I get it. I think you have to find, I can only speak from my own experience. I was socially awkward. I was the weird dude until I found a couple of people who were just cool with it. They understood, like, Jeff's trying to figure it out. And so they kind of created, I hate to say this, like a safe space for me to be weird and finally kind of figure it out and come into my own. And it was a blessing. And those people I cherish. I married one of them. So,
that's really cherished.
Yeah, I think you have to find those people that are just cool with you being you and letting you figure it out.
That's so important, and particularly for us introverts, because we don't have a large social circle. We're not going to
Oh,
have
that's
like an
true.
entourage. We're going to have like 2 people, like
Yep.
maybe, like
Yeah.
generously 3, and that's like from childhood until like elder age. I'll have like 3 people, and so it becomes even more important for us to not just be selective about who we spend our time with, but for us to have those solid bonds with those 2 or 3 people. We are with them forever. They're never going to get rid of
Yeah.
us, because we now have a space where we can have that social side of us nourished, where we do want to engage and talk and to have this exploration, because that's what we do, but not having all of the layers of sifting and sorting and
Yep.
figuring out that typically comes with our engagement with others. And so that's why it's really important to have that portion of the conversation at least noted.
Yeah. No, I agree. I 100% agree with you that I have just a handful of people that I can rely on. And I can tell you, if I bring you into the inner circle, you're in all the way. And for me, so it's easy for someone to, it's easy for me to get taken advantage of. It's easy for me to get hurt easily because I don't let people in. And so when I do let you in, you have access to cause some harm. But I want to throw this at you, because I want to get your response. Your opinion at least on introversion and anxiety? I mean, do you think there tends to be a little bit of a correlation there, or?
From a research standpoint, the jury is still out.
Okay.
As with a lot of things. Sometimes introversion gets used interchangeably for being socially anxious or for being shy.
Right.
Those are 3 distinct things. They have nothing to do with one another, but there are some commonalities in as far as the way people will outwardly engage or not.
Yeah.
In the case of all 3 of these. And so when it comes to anxiety, like I mentioned, you can be a socially anxious person and still be an extrovert.
Absolutely.
Being in that dynamic is a nightmare, because
it usually ends up viral
on
YouTube or Twitter or anything.
In order for you to process what's going on in your world, you need to engage with people. You need to have dialogue with them, engage with your world. However, to do so is like a fate worse than death. So how do you engage with your world? Right. You're constantly having to navigate that push and pull if you're extroverted and also socially anxious. Now, what I will say is, for anxiety on the whole, and especially within social scenarios, there are a number of introverts who also experience that as like an add-on. So it's like, I'm a woman and I'm a Black person. I'm a Black woman. Oh my, like it's not that being a woman makes me Black, and it's not that being Black makes me a woman. Right. I just happen to have both. Right. So for anxiety and introversion, these are 2 separate things, but sometimes they come together. One doesn't cause or change or create the other. They just happen to both be there in tandem. Right. And so that becomes its own sort of, how do you navigate this, where to be engaged with people causes this sense of doom and anxiousness. Yeah, fear. It causes all these feelings, and you need that portion as a human to engage with other people, but you need to process what you've had before. And so it creates its own dynamic, but one is not equal to the other, and having one characteristic doesn't naturally lend itself to the other.
How blessed are we to live in a time now where there are some terms for it. People are starting to see what it is, accept terms for it. You're not being accused of hysteria or some, random umbrella diagnosis that throws you in the nut house and lobotomized. Yeah. Now it's like,
especially
he's introverted.
Especially when you think about with issues of gender, this becomes even more amplified. Like, what a great time that we're in now. Like, I mean, it's a dumpster fire, but in comparison, it's pretty great. I mean, we made some strides. The dumpster has been moving along,
funny.
Because a lot of these tendencies with anxiety and even with introversion, for women, it's not just, okay, you're experiencing this. It's because you are a woman, you are experiencing this, and therefore we need to take you out of circulation. And so the magnitude of that is just immense, as opposed to, oh, okay, you just need some downtime.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. Has nothing to do with your gender. And so that also becomes an interesting aspect of intersectionality.
Intersectionality. I love it.
Yes.
So where can people find you?
First of all, sign up to get the notice for the pre-sales and get some info at introvertscan.com.
Well, listen, I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes so people can click right on it. Before we leave, do you have any kind of hints or tips? I know we've talked about it a lot, but do you have any kind of last thoughts about being an introvert, or tools that people can use, like writers themselves, to help them I don't want to say overcome it, but accept it and use it?
I think the main thing is to remember that introversion is not a flaw to fix or an obstacle that you need to overcome. It is, in fact, an invitation for you to live deeply and impact greatly. So embrace your awesome and do it.
Hey, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter by using my handle @ScreenwriterPod. And if you liked the show, please support it by subscribing and sharing the episode on your social media.